Hi, I'm Victoria Wood. Joining me today is Luke Croft. Luke received his bachelor's in Bible at Johnson University. Thank you for joining me here today, Luke. My first question for you is, after watching the video, would you say that America's perception of God has changed ever since the Founding Fathers?
I think that's such a difficult question to answer just because the framework of America is built on so many varieties of people. And all we have really from the Founding Fathers' days are quotes from them, things that they wrote. I believe there was an awareness and a recognition of God's function in the founding of the nation that definitely played a part in the way that they perceived America. But now that we've been built up, I mean, we're a country built on immigration. All of us are from ancestors that were immigrants to this country, and because of that, there's just been a flood of all kinds of different ideologies and spiritualities that have come into America. And so has the perception of God changed as a society? Most definitely, but only in as much as there's been more variety in the ideas about who God is. You know, we have a significant Islamic population. There's Buddhists, there's Eastern religions, and New Age spirituality, and so it's a more varied idea of who God is. Whereas in the beginning, it was mostly Protestantism, because that's what America was founded for. It was a Protestant kind of escape from the oppression that was England trying to put Anglicanism on its people.
So a lot of people think that America was truly founded on deeply Christian roots, but would you say that maybe it wasn't, and that is a misconstrued belief that a lot of Americans cling to today?
I wouldn't. The thing about talking about these Christian principles is there was definitely a recognition of God. There was a belief in God from our founding fathers. But if you look into the history of the spirituality of our founding fathers, you'll see that a lot of the movers and shakers in the late 1700s were, at the very best, rational theists who believed God is real, but only as much as we can explain the things that he has done, to the other end of the spectrum of just being completely deist, where they believed there was a God who created the world, but we can't really relate to that God, and so he doesn't really play a part in our affairs. We just recognize his existence. Take, for example, Thomas Jefferson, penned the Declaration of Independence, one of the key figures in the founding of this nation. He has become famous for what's been called the Jeffersonian Bible, where he cut out every single miracle in the Bible that cannot be explained by rational thought. So Jesus turning water into wine, that doesn't make sense. Let's get that out of there. Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, let's get that out of there. Jesus himself raising from the dead, let's cut that and get it out of there, because we can't rationally wrap our minds around it. And in Scripture, Paul tells us that without the resurrection, everything that we believe is in vain. And so if Jefferson himself didn't believe in the resurrection, and if founding fathers who identified, as I believe they did with Jefferson, didn't believe in the resurrection, then they've taken the very pillar of what holds up Christianity out. And so can you really call it a Christian value when they didn't even believe in the resurrection? Now, they did believe in equality of people, and they believed in a creator who brought the world into its form, but it wasn't Christian principles as we see Christian principles today.
And speaking of prominent historical figures, in more recent times, men like Teddy Roosevelt and Ronald Reagan, they showed very strong Christian values in the way that they lived their life and performed their duties. Would you say that Christianity has definitely seen a downfall since that time, and why do you think that in more recent years it's become more unpopular in our government?
One of the things that we have to ask in those situations is, was the driving force behind the decisions of Teddy Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Reagan, were all of those decisions for glorifying God, or was it for the betterment of the country? I think sometimes we try to make those things to work in tandem. Like the things that better America are the most glorifying to God. And all throughout our history, we have used faith, and this is coming from a person of faith, but we've used our faith to justify a lot of the things that we do. And before the figures that you mentioned, there were scriptural arguments for the way that we kept and treated slaves. And people who considered themselves to uphold Christian values also justified the way they treated slaves. And then carry that forward into the times of Eisenhower and the times of Roosevelt, and even somewhat into the times of Reagan, even though it was a little further on. But we had imperialism, American imperialism, that was founded on the idea that God has bestowed on us this blessing so that we can share it with the world and kind of force it on the world. And with that, we kind of perverted a lot of the cultures that we forced ourselves into because of that. And then prohibition was something that was just vehemently backed by Christian policies and the misinterpretation of Scripture onwards to the Civil Rights Movement. There were people on the side that were oppressing minorities that founded their beliefs on Scripture. Same thing with the denial of basic civil rights to women, the rights to vote, the rights to education, the right to equal pay. A lot of those things were built on arguments of people who said that they held Christian values, but really didn't want to undermine the fabric of what they believed America was supposed to be.
Luke, why do you think Americans are so radical about keeping God out of the symbols of our nation? Why do you think they care so much?
We have misconstrued the ideas of our founding fathers. We think that they came across the pond to establish a Christian nation, when really what they were coming across the pond to do was to escape religious oppression and found a country that was based and rooted in religious freedom. Let's do just a little hypothetical, flip it on its head. Let's say you and I, as we're practicing Christians. We're living in a country who the very first amendment of their Constitution promises that the government is not going to set up a state-sponsored religion. But yet everywhere we turn within our government, we see "In Allah we trust," and when we go to court, we have to place our hand on the Quran, and we see all of these Islamic symbols within it. We would become highly offended by those things, especially when we have ancestors who came to this country believing that this was a place of equal opportunity for all sorts of people. And so I think people are getting offended by it because there are people who use that money. There are people who reside in this country and maintain the belief that we can't deny the founding fathers had, that this is going to be a place of religious freedom. But yet they are being forced to, and kind of, these images and the wording of God and these Christian values are kind of being just placed right in front of their face. And I thought the video made a bigger deal out of it than it really needed to, because Christian values don't start top down. They don't start from the government kind of like imposing on us what our values should be. It starts from the bottom up of us establishing community with one another and showing that in God I trust. And so this is how this affects my life. Let me show you how it can affect yours if you place your trust in Him. Nobody's walking into that Congressional Visitor Center that video was talking about, looking at and seeing "In God we trust" and saying, I didn't trust in Him before I walked in here, but now that I see that, maybe I'll start. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in the wrong arguments, and it's not about imposing these things on people, and it's not about getting offended when people want them to get out, but it's about re-shifting our focus and realizing, like, these are losing battles. These are battles that we're going to lose, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that we're going to lose them, because what it means is that us as individuals need to solidify our beliefs at a grassroots level.
Thank you so much, Luke, for joining me today. We really appreciate your insight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.